What happens when one of comedy's most fearless voices sits down with one of daytime television's most outspoken hosts? You get an exchange so intense, so unfiltered, that it left the entire studio audience in stunned silence. Bill Burr walked onto the view set expecting the usual back and forth, but what unfolded was something nobody saw coming. This wasn't just another celebrity interview. This was a masterclass in how quickly a conversation can go from friendly banter to a full-blown confrontation. Before we dive into exactly what was said that had everyone talking, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think about what went down. Bill Burr settled into his seat on the panel, and you could already feel the energy in the room shift. Joy Behar, never one to hold back, wasted no time jumping straight into it. She leaned forward with that signature look she gets when she's about to make a point and said, "So, Bill, I've got to ask you about something you said on your podcast last month. You were talking about cancel culture, and you seemed to suggest that people are too sensitive these days. Don't you think that's a pretty privileged position to take?" The audience gave a light applause, clearly on Joy's side from the jump. But Bill, he just smiled. Not a friendly smile, more like the smile of someone who knew exactly where this was heading and was ready for it. He leaned back in his chair, took a breath, and responded, "Privileged? Joy, I grew up in a town where if you didn't learn to take a joke, you didn't survive the weekend. I'm not saying people are too sensitive. I'm saying we've created a culture where everyone's walking on eggshells, terrified of saying the wrong thing. That's not sensitivity. That's fear." Joy immediately jumped back in, her voice rising just a notch. "But Bill, when you say things like that, you're dismissing real harm that words can cause. There are communities, marginalized communities, who have been hurt by careless language for generations. Shouldn't we be more thoughtful about what we say?" Bill nodded slowly, and for a second it looked like he might agree. But then he said, "Thoughtful? Absolutely. Terrified? No. There's a difference between being considerate and being controlled. And right now, Joy, it feels like a lot of people want to control what others can and cannot say. That's not progress. That's just a different kind of oppression." The tension in the room kicked up another level. You could see the other hosts exchanging glances, unsure whether to jump in or let this play out. Joy wasn't backing down, though. She shot back. "Oppression? You're comparing being asked to be respectful to oppression? That's absurd, Bill. Nobody's oppressing you by asking you to think before you speak." Bill leaned forward now, matching her energy. "I do think before I speak, Joy. That's the whole point. But thinking before you speak doesn't mean you let other people do your thinking for you. Comedy, real comedy, is about pushing boundaries. It's about making people uncomfortable sometimes, because that's how you get them to see things differently. If we sanitize everything, if we sand down every rough edge, we don't get truth anymore. We just get propaganda dressed up as politeness." Joy's eyes narrowed. "So what you're saying is, you should be able to say whatever you want, consequences be damned?" Bill shook his head. "No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying there should be room for nuance. There should be room for context. Right now, we've got people losing their jobs, their careers, their entire lives over jokes they made 10 years ago, over comments taken out of context, over misunderstandings. That's not justice, Joy. That's a mob mentality with a hashtag." One of the other hosts, trying to ease the tension, interjected with, "But Bill, don't you think some accountability is necessary? I mean, if someone says something truly harmful, shouldn't there be consequences?" Bill turned to her and said, "Of course there should be consequences, but consequences should be proportional. If someone says something stupid, call them out, have a conversation. Give them a chance to learn and grow. But destroying someone's entire existence? That's not accountability. That's revenge." Joy wasn't having it. She came back strong. "Bill, you keep talking about nuance and context, but you're ignoring the fact that, for a lot of people, there is no nuance when it comes to hate speech. When someone uses a slur, when someone demeans an entire group of people, that's not a joke. That's violence. Bill's jaw tightened. You could see he was getting frustrated, but he kept his composure. Words are not violence, Joy. Words can be hurtful, words can be cruel, but they are not the same as physical violence. And when we start equating the two, we diminish actual violence. We make it harder to address real harm because we're too busy being outraged over tweets. The audience was split now. Some people were clapping for Joy, others were nodding along with Bill. The energy was electric, and you could tell this was going somewhere neither of them had planned. Joy took a sip of water, clearly gathering herself for the next round. She put her glass down and said, "You know what I think, Bill? I think you're hiding behind comedy. I think you use humor as a shield so you can say whatever you want without having to take responsibility for it." That hit different. Bill's entire demeanor changed. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked Joy dead in the eye and said, "Hiding behind comedy? Joy, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've said things on stage that have gotten me booed, that have gotten me threats, that have cost me opportunities. I don't hide behind anything. I stand on stage, alone, with a microphone, and I say what I think is true, and yeah, sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I miss the mark, but at least I'm willing to take that risk. At least I'm willing to put myself out there and face the consequences. Can you say the same?" Joy bristled at that. "What's that supposed to mean?" Bill didn't back down. "It means you sit behind this desk every day with a team of writers, a supportive audience, and a network backing you up. You've got all the protection in the world. So forgive me if I don't take lectures about courage from someone who's never had to stand alone and face the fire." The studio went quiet. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Joy stared at Bill, and Bill stared right back. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and measured. "You think I haven't faced consequences for what I've said? You think I haven't been criticized, attacked, threatened? I've been doing this longer than you, Bill. Don't you dare suggest I don't know what it's like to stand up for what I believe." Bill nodded. "You're right. You have. And I respect that. But here's the difference between us, Joy. When you get backlash, you've got this entire platform to defend yourself. You've got colleagues, you've got producers, you've got an infrastructure. When I get backlash, I've got me. Just me. And somehow, I'm the one who's supposed to watch what I say." Joy sat back for a moment, clearly processing what Bill had just said. You could see the wheels turning. Then, she leaned forward again, and her tone shifted. It wasn't angry anymore. It was something else. Something sharper. "You want to talk about platforms, Bill? Let's talk about platforms. You've got Netflix specials. You've got a podcast with millions of listeners. You've got sold-out arenas. Don't sit here and pretend you're some underdog fighting the system. You are the system." Bill laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh you give when someone completely misses your point. "Joy, having a platform doesn't mean I'm protected. It means I have more to lose. Every special I do, every podcast episode, every interview, it's all recorded. It's all out there forever. One wrong word, one joke that doesn't land the way I intended, and it follows me for the rest of my career. You think that's power? That's a target on my back." Another host chimed in, trying to find middle ground. "But Bill, isn't that just accountability? Isn't that what comes with having influence?" Bill turned to her. "Accountability, sure, but there's a difference between being held accountable and being hunted. There are people out there who spend their entire day looking for reasons to be offended. They're not looking for dialogue. They're not looking for understanding. They're looking for blood. And the internet has made it easier than ever for them to get it." Joy jumped back in. "Oh, here we go. The poor persecuted comedian routine. Bill, you make millions of dollars saying whatever you want. Forgive me if I don't feel sorry for you." Bill's face hardened. "I'm not asking for your sympathy, Joy. I'm asking for intellectual honesty. You're sitting here acting like consequences are always fair, like the punishment always fits the crime. But you and I both know that's not true. We've seen people destroyed for things that didn't deserve destruction. We've seen careers ended over misunderstandings. And instead of admitting that maybe, just maybe, we've gone too far, you're doubling down. You're defending a system that eats people alive. Joy's voice rose. What I'm defending is the idea that words matter, that what we say has impact. You seem to think that because you're a comedian, you should get a free pass. Well, I'm sorry, Bill, but that's not how the world works anymore. Bill shot back immediately. I don't want a free pass, Joy. I want fairness. I want proportionality. I want a world where we can disagree without destroying each other. But that's not the world you're advocating for. The world you're advocating for is one where people are so afraid of saying the wrong thing that they don't say anything at all. And that's not progress. That's silence. One of the other hosts tried to interject. But Bill, surely you can see that some speech is harmful. Surely you can see that some things shouldn't be said. Bill nodded. Of course I can see that. But who gets to decide what shouldn't be said? You? Joy? Twitter? The problem with censorship, even well-intentioned censorship, is that it always starts with the things everyone agrees are bad. But it never stops there. It keeps expanding. It keeps growing. And eventually, you can't say anything that challenges the narrative without being labeled dangerous. Joy shook her head vigorously. That's a slippery slope fallacy, Bill. Just because we're asking people to be respectful doesn't mean we're heading toward some dystopian nightmare where nobody can speak. Bill leaned in. Is it a fallacy, Joy? Because I've watched it happen. I've watched comedians I respect get labeled as bigots for jokes that were clearly satire. I've watched academics lose their jobs for presenting research that contradicted popular opinion. I've watched ordinary people get harassed and threatened for having the wrong take on social media. So forgive me if I don't trust that this stops at just being respectful. The audience was completely absorbed now. Some were uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Others were leaning forward, hanging on every word. Joy took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was cold. You know what, Bill? I think the real issue here is that you're afraid. You're afraid that the world is changing, and you're being left behind. You're afraid that the things you used to be able to say, the jokes you used to be able to make, don't work anymore. And instead of evolving, instead of adapting, you're lashing out. Bill didn't flinch. You think I'm afraid of change? Joy, I've been changing my entire career. Every special I do is different from the last one. Every year I'm trying new material, new perspectives, new ways of looking at the world. What I'm afraid of is conformity. I'm afraid of a world where everyone thinks the same, talks the same, believes the same things because they're too scared to question anything. That's what terrifies me. Joy wasn't letting up, but questioning things and being deliberately provocative are two different things, Bill. Sometimes it feels like you're just trying to get a reaction. Like you're more interested in being controversial than being thoughtful. Bill's eyes flashed. You want to talk about being provocative? Joy, you've built your entire career on being provocative. You've said things on this show that have sparked outrage, that have caused boycotts, that have gotten you suspended. So don't sit there and act like you're above it all. The only difference between us is that when you do it, you call it speaking truth to power. When I do it, you call it being insensitive. Joy's face flushed. That's completely different, and you know it. When I speak out, I'm punching up. I'm challenging people in positions of power. You're punching down. You're making fun of people who are already marginalized. Bill shook his head, frustration written all over his face. I'm not punching down, Joy. I'm making fun of everyone. That's the whole point of comedy. Nobody's off limits. Rich, poor, black, white, gay, straight, everyone gets it. Because that's equality. Real equality. Not this performative nonsense where we pretend some people are too fragile to handle a joke. One of the other hosts cut in. But Bill, context matters. A joke about a powerful politician is not the same as a joke about a vulnerable community. Bill turned to her. I agree. Context does matter, which is exactly why we need to stop treating every joke, every comment, every offhand remark as if it carries the same weight. We need to be able to distinguish between someone making a thoughtless comment and someone genuinely trying to cause harm. But we can't do that in a culture that treats everything as equally offensive. Joy jumped back in, her voice sharp. So what you're saying is we should just ignore it when someone says something hurtful? We should just let it slide? Bill exhaled slowly, trying to maintain his patience. No, Joy. What I'm saying is we should have a conversation. We should give people the benefit of the doubt. We should assume that most people are not trying to be malicious, and when they say something wrong, we should educate them instead of annihilating them. But that requires nuance. That requires empathy. And right now, there's no room for either. Joy stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, quietly but firmly, I think what you're really asking for is the right to be offensive without consequences. And I'm sorry, Bill, but that's not a right you have. Bill's response was immediate. I'm not asking for the right to be offensive without consequences, Joy. I'm asking for the consequences to make sense. I'm asking for a world where we can make mistakes and learn from them without having our entire lives destroyed. I'm asking for compassion, but apparently that's too much to ask. The silence that followed was deafening. Joy looked at Bill like she was seeing him for the first time, really seeing him. And then something unexpected happened. Her expression softened just slightly. You want compassion? That's rich, coming from someone whose entire act is based on tearing people down. Bill sat up straighter. My act isn't about tearing people down, Joy. It's about pointing out hypocrisy. It's about highlighting the absurdity of life. And yeah, sometimes that means I make fun of people. But I make fun of myself just as much, probably more. The difference is, I don't pretend to be morally superior while I'm doing it. Joy's eyes narrowed. Are you saying I pretend to be morally superior? Bill didn't hesitate. I'm saying you have a habit of acting like your opinions are facts, like anyone who disagrees with you is either stupid or evil. And that's dangerous, Joy. Because when you shut down conversation, when you demonize the other side, you don't solve problems, you just create deeper divisions. Another host jumped in, clearly uncomfortable with where this was going. I think what Joy is trying to say is that there are certain values we should all agree on: human dignity, equality, respect. Those aren't opinions, those are fundamentals. Bill nodded. Absolutely, I agree with all of that. But here's the problem. Those words mean different things to different people. Human dignity, what does that mean? Does it mean we protect people from ever being offended? Does it mean we create safe spaces where nobody ever has to hear an idea they disagree with? Because if that's what it means, then we're not talking about dignity anymore. We're talking about infantilization. Joy's voice cut through. Nobody's being infantilized, Bill. People are asking to be treated with basic respect. Why is that so hard for you to understand? Bill leaned forward, his voice intense but controlled. It's not hard for me to understand, Joy. What's hard for me to understand is why we've decided that respect means never challenging anyone, never questioning anything, never pushing boundaries. That's not respect, that's stagnation. And in a world that's constantly changing, stagnation is death. Joy shot back. So what? We should just say whatever we want and call it progress? We should just ignore the pain we cause and call it pushing boundaries? Bill shook his head firmly. No. We should be aware of the pain we cause. We should be thoughtful about our words. But we should also recognize that growth is uncomfortable. Change is uncomfortable. And if we're so afraid of discomfort that we never say anything that might upset someone, we'll never grow. we'll never change. We'll just stay stuck in our own echo chambers, convinced we're right about everything. One of the other hosts spoke up. But Bill, don't you think there's a difference between productive discomfort and just being mean? Bill turned to her. Of course there is, and that's where intent matters. If someone's genuinely trying to hurt people, call them out. But if someone's trying to make a point, even if they do it clumsily, even if they screw up the delivery, maybe give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe ask what they meant before you assume the worst. Joy wasn't buying it. That sounds like a lot of excuses for bad behavior, Bill. At some point, you have to take responsibility for your words. Bill's voice rose slightly. I do take responsibility for my words, Joy. Every single day. But responsibility is a two-way street. The people listening also have a responsibility. A responsibility to think critically. A responsibility to understand context. A responsibility to not take everything in the worst possible way. Joy leaned back, crossing her arms. So now it's the audience's fault if they're offended? Bill exhaled sharply. That's not what I said. But yeah, sometimes people choose to be offended. Sometimes people go looking for reasons to be upset. And when that happens, no matter what you say, no matter how carefully you say it, it's never going to be enough. Because the goal isn't understanding. The goal is outrage. The tension in the room was palpable. Another host tried to lighten things. Well, I think we can all agree that communication is hard. Bill turned to her with a slight smile. Communication is hard. But it's a lot harder when one side gets to decide what's acceptable and what's not. When one side gets to move the goalposts whenever it's convenient, that's not communication. That's control. Joy's voice was ice cold now. You keep using that word, control, like someone's trying to control you. Nobody's controlling you, Bill. You're free to say whatever you want. But you're not free from the consequences. Bill met her gaze, and there it is. The line everyone uses when they want to justify destroying someone. You're free to speak, but we're free to ruin your life. That's not freedom, Joy. That's tyranny, dressed up as accountability. Joy's face flushed red. Tyranny? You're calling accountability tyranny? Do you hear yourself right now? Bill didn't back down. When the punishment is disproportionate to the offense, yeah, I call that tyranny. When someone loses everything over a joke, over a comment, over something they said a decade ago, that's not justice. That's mob rule. One of the other hosts interjected, her voice shaking slightly. But Bill, some things are unforgivable. Some words cause irreparable harm. Bill turned to her, his voice softer now but still firm. I understand that. I really do. But here's what I've learned in 30 years of doing this. People are complicated. People make mistakes. People say things they don't mean, or they mean things they say badly. And if we don't leave room for people to mess up and learn and grow, we're not creating a better world. We're just creating a world where everyone's too scared to be human. Joy shook her head. That's a nice speech, Bill. But it doesn't change the fact that words have power. And people who have platforms, people like you and me, we have a responsibility to use that power wisely. Bill nodded slowly. You're right, we do. But wisdom isn't about always playing it safe. Wisdom is about knowing when to push and when to pull back. It's about understanding that sometimes the right thing to say is the thing that makes people uncomfortable, because comfort doesn't lead to growth. Challenge does. Joy stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, her voice quiet but steely, I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on this one. Bill smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That's the thing, Joy. I'm okay with disagreeing. I'm okay with you thinking I'm wrong. What I'm not okay with is pretending that your way is the only way, that your perspective is the only valid one, because that's where this whole thing falls apart. When we stop listening to each other and start demanding that everyone think like us. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, one of the producers signaled from off stage that they needed to wrap up. The host in the middle jumped in. Well, this has certainly been a spirited conversation. Bill, thank you for being here, and for not holding back. Bill nodded. Thanks for having me. Even if we don't agree, I appreciate the conversation. Joy added, her tone professional but cool. Always good to have different perspectives, even when they're challenging. The audience applauded, but it was awkward, uncertain. You could tell people didn't know how to feel about what they'd just witnessed. Bill stood up, shook hands with the hosts, and walked off stage. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds, capturing the hosts' faces as they tried to process what had just happened. What you just heard was one of the most intense exchanges in recent talk show history. Bill Burr and Joy Behar went toe-to-toe on issues that most people are afraid to even talk about. They didn't hold back, they didn't play it safe, and they gave us a raw, unfiltered look at the cultural divide that's shaping our world right now. If you made it this far, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we bring you stories like this that cut through the noise and show you what's really happening. And drop a comment below. We want to know, who do you think made the stronger argument in this exchange, Bill or Joy?